People that held their vote in swing states or people that voted third party in swing states will never make sense to me. And I hold them just as accountable as people that flat out voted for him.
It's not just that like we're dealing with a fascist and he's destroying the country, but there's so much apathy. There's so many people that feel it's hopeless or they're not paying attention.
There were so many people that I knew that right after the election, it shook out and I was like, did you vote? And they're like, no, my vote wouldn't matter. Every person you tell, yeah, your vote doesn't matter to, spreads.
Everyone is an influencer. You can have influence over people just because they're in your life. You know, that your people at your church, people you work with, those of us that are paying attention need to make everyone else pay attention.
I think people underestimate the power of what their voice can do.
Welcome back to the Boardwalk Podcast. I am Meredith and I am here with Gabe and it's Luke. Hi, everyone.
How's it going?
Hey.
I invited Luke onto our podcast because we have similar passions, which is getting mad at the state of the country. We were talking a little bit before we started recording about not just being trolled by MAGA, but being trolled by the far left, which is something we deal with too. And I don't like either of them, but I think at this point I have grown to have more contempt for far left people acting
100%.
like a-holes in my comments than MAGA, because
100%.
they sort of imply that we have some shared values. Like if you're on the left, in theory, like you want a kinder, more just world. That's sort of the core belief system of being on the left. But then the way they go about talking about how they think they're going to achieve that is so malevolent and so unrealistic that I don't believe in their commitment to a kinder and more just world. They truly drive us wild.
The thing about it for me is that they not only do they operate on this idea that they have a moral superiority to anybody that's, operating in a reality like, okay, yeah, we're going to vote for some people that we don't necessarily like all their stances, but that's better than the alternative. So they act like they have this moral superiority over them, and then they also act like they have an IQ superiority over you, where it's like, yeah, they act like they know more than you on every subject, and it's just never true. Like they have these things that they want to happen that in a real world will never happen, at least from where we are right now. And they have no like realistic path to how they want them to happen. It's just like, to me, the analogy has always been, it's like kids that are running for class president in high school, and they're like, oh, we're gonna have pizza lunches on every Friday, and there's going to be vending machines in every classroom. It's like, that's never going to happen. But, there's still that little bit of, idiots that think that's going to happen and vote for them. And I can't stand it.
Whether it started out with good intention, it certainly has driven its way to a point of ultimatum, right?
Yep.
It has to be this or anything. I mean, like Pearl Mania just made a video the other day where he was like, Jill Stein, where are you?
I saw that video.
And it's a perfect call out because all these people who said, Kamala Harris is pro-genocide. Kamala Harris is going to make all these situations worse. And Jill Stein is the perfect solution between them. Because even Jill Stein was like, Democrats and Republicans are of the same kind. They are no better or worse than each other. They are equal. And so you should split your vote for the Green Party.
Right.
And then you look at the situation, you're like, no, anyone with a brain or two brain cells to rub together could have told you that we knew where this was going to end up, and here we are in this perfect storm of a situation where we've got Alex Padilla who's getting arrested and detained for just asking a question to Christine.
For asking a question, yep.
Right, and so like we're in this point where like the question has to be is like, how does fascism taste today? Because you all said this was going to be the outcome, if not worse, if Kamala Harris came in because of your moral superiority or your moral high horse or whatever. And then now you're like, how does it taste? Because this is what we have to wake up to every morning because you decided that it was either your way or the highway. And now we all have to pay the unfortunate price.
Well, and for me, it's always that, like, if you look at it in a realistic sense, right, from the election, Jill Stein was never going to happen. Not in a million years.
Right.
And so voting for her, for me, is basically like you're okay with either of the other two options. It's the same as not voting because you're basically saying, yeah, I don't give a what my vote does. I'm good with either option outside of that. And like maybe the cases can be made where it's like, okay, I wanted to support Jill Stein if I'm in a blue state. Okay, I get it. Fine, kind of, but okay. But like people that held their vote in swing states or people that voted third party in swing states will never make sense to me. And I hold them just as accountable as people that flat out voted for him.
Yeah.
Because somehow those people are the most vocal about, well, your vote doesn't even really matter. So even if their vote for Stein didn't really do anything, the people that they influenced by saying, yeah, my vote doesn't matter, those people matter too. It's a virus
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
to me, I would even say that the people who voted for Jill Stein are worse because they actively went out. It sounds like someone who's like, oh, I'm not even going to vote. Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
They actively drove or walked to the polls and looked at the ballot and said, yeah, you know what? I think she's the one. Or like, I don't like the other two because of whatever I've been given propaganda-wise. I would almost say, at least for me personally, that someone who went out and voted third party for Jill Stein was even worse because they actually made the effort to go to the polls, and
Right.
they could have made the right decision.
They were there. They could have done
they
the
were
right
there.
thing.
They put all the energy in, as opposed to like, I'm on the couch, I'm just gonna like watch whatever movie on
Right.
Netflix. They actively was like, I'm gonna go and do this, and I'm gonna make a difference. When it's like, the Green Party has never been a party that was gonna have majority.
Nope.
Yes, it's unfortunate we have a two-party system, but that's the situation, and these are the cards you're dealt. So you better, play the better hand of the two. And you decided to fold when you had, a chance for blackjack or whatever it
Something.
might be. Like,
Yeah.
like it just, yeah.
And that's where it comes back to like people that don't operate in reality, because like anybody knows that going there to vote for her does all just nothing. Like maybe she gets to hang on for another 4 years. Well, she'll get her money this time. She'll wait 4 years. She'll suck that same 1% away next time, and she'll be silent the whole time. Everybody who voted for her with any like real brain cells knew that was how it was going to go, and that's why I have a real issue with them, because you don't see them. They're never out there advocating for ranked choice voting. I've never seen a Jill Stein voter make a video asking for ranked choice voting, not once.
Yeah, what I do see them doing is not only either not voting or voting for third party, but trying to use their platforms to influence what other people do, trying to get other people to not vote, trying to get other people to vote third party. So when they try to justify their behavior by, well, our votes wouldn't have changed anything, it's not just about their votes. It's about the votes that they disenfranchised when they told other people not to vote or told other people
Right.
to vote third party. So I think they like underestimate that their influence is beyond just like what you choose to do. It's how you choose to influence people.
Yeah.
Right. I live in Iowa, very red state. There was that poll that came out that said it could be flip flu, and I was like, I don't really believe that. I'm still going to vote. But there were so many people that I knew that right after the election, it shook out, and I was like, did you vote? And they're like, no, my vote wouldn't matter. Well, your vote doesn't matter if you're one person, but every person you tell, yeah, your vote doesn't matter to spreads. Like, it doesn't matter by itself, sure, but like it spreads, and I can't stand hearing that.
I can't stand hearing it either. And the other thing I can't figure out is if this is a cycle that we're just like doomed to be stuck with forever. And the reason I say that is because when I was like very young adult, like first old enough to vote, it was George W. Bush versus Gore, which I know I'm dating myself here. But when that election happened, there was a third person, Ralph Nader, running. And Ralph Nader was like the Jill Stein of the time. And I had a bunch of people my age, late teens, early 20s, saying to me, oh, you got to vote your conscience. Don't vote for Gore. He's, the corporate Democrat shill. Vote for Nader. And even as a really young person at the time, I was like, I don't believe that that's a good idea. I think if you vote for Nader, you're going to make George W. Bush president. I'm not doing that. And I don't want you to do that. And sure enough, that's exactly how that went.
Right.
And so seeing it play out now with Gen Z, I'm just like, oh my God, this is just going to be forever. Like every young generation is going to come along and do the same thing. I don't know how to make it stop.
Anyone who was born pre-2000 or just like on the cusp of the millennium, like I think a lot of people look back and can acknowledge certain historical events, right? World War I, World War II, civil rights movement, things like that, where you're like, this is very close to our life, right? But this Gen Z group, I look at that and I don't know if it's COVID or, disinformation or what have you, but I look at them and I see where they apply like relativity of time to historical events where they don't even acknowledge those things because they're like, oh, that was so long ago, right?
Right.
And it's like, it's actually not. They're like, civil rights was 60 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a long time. World War II, like we're talking 80 years ago, the Holocaust, like these are things that will and can repeat itself. And we're seeing it happen right now. And, these Gen Z voters who are like, oh, I'm going to vote third party or I'm going to do this or whatever. And I look at that and they like don't have, it's like once we hit 2000, that like idea that they could connect to something historically important that will, again, is happening right now, it's like totally lost on them.
Yep.
So to apply to the Gore Bush versus Nader, I certainly look at that and like they don't understand and have that like historical like marker on the timeline to say like, oh yes, this was the wrong choice before, and this is, you know, outside of also Roger Stone and things that happen with, you know, tabulating the ballots, but like you look at that and for them, they just don't even say like, oh, this is applicable. This is the same thing. We're like repeating this over and over again. And so that's been something I've been trying to like grasp with, like how someone, I guess younger, they just like out of sight, out of mind, didn't even learn about it, know about it, and they've fallen into the problem of repeating history.
I honestly think social media is to blame. Like the sheer like volume of that you're exposed to all the time, I think it dilutes the knowledge that you have on stuff that happened in the past, right? Like if you're in the mid 2000s, like early 2000s, most of the news is TV or newspaper or like radio show, I guess. And now, I mean, you could scroll on TikTok for an hour and you've heard about 50 different news stories on 50 different things that are happening, and it's tough for your brain to make those connections like off the cuff. I made a video not too long ago about Kilmar Abrego Garcia and how he's coming back to the U.S. to supposedly be charged with trafficking illegal immigrants across like throughout the U.S. And when I read that story, I was like, well, that's bullshit. But also, what is there in history that's directly applicable? And it was like, I didn't have to look very far. It was 2 years ago or 3 years ago when Greg Abbott was carting illegal immigrants all around to democratically governed areas because he wanted to make a political statement. Like when you have to look for things that are repeating, you don't have to look as far. And I think that dilutes it. Cause like when you're talking about things like what's going on right now with, Los Angeles, like people don't see that as necessarily like, oh, that's similar to civil rights. They look at it, oh, that's similar to George Floyd riots. Like they don't look as far back to understand the gravity of what they're dealing with. It's recency bias is what it is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I also find myself, when I do talk to like Gen Z friends, really feeling for them because they don't have like a personal frame of reference of a time in history when things weren't this crazy.
Right.
Gabe's a millennial. I'm kind of on the cusp between Gen X and millennial. And so like we can remember farther back, like we can very well remember life before the internet as adults. And it wasn't like this. Like it wasn't perfect. It had problems, but to have no historical reference of like having lived in a world where it wasn't this crazy, I feel like it really kind of impacts how Gen Z behaves about this stuff and how Gen Z perceives things. I know Gen Z is like a mostly much more right-wing, especially the guys, more right-wing generation than other younger generations. And it's just like a problem I don't really know how to solve because it seems like it repeats itself.
Yeah, I mean, I can say, friends who I have within the Black community and the Jewish community, like their grandparents or their parents, you know, the thing was like, hey, know your history, like know where your family comes from and what we dealt with, because again, history will repeat itself. And for them, they're like, yep, got it. You know, it is part of my family, part of my culture. Like that is part of my DNA. And then as you go like the next generation or the following generation or whatever, it like loses its, this like seriousness, right? And so then you come back to this point of like, oh, well, that was like so long ago. That would never happen, you know? And you're like, no, it literally can and will happen again.
And is happening, right?
Yeah, right. And it's like, it's not like fascism is innovative. It's going to be the same tool that they use over and over again to the same amount types of people. Your skin's darker, you don't like the same people, you don't follow the same religion, whatever it might be. Anyone who is opposite the rule that is like in power,
conventionally agreed upon by the people in power.
Exactly. And you look at that and you're like, they're going to repeat the same tactics. It's not like the language ever changes. It's in it's in a different language, but it's the same type of, you know, rhetoric that's going to be repeated. And it's like, obviously, I think ultimately we will be successful. We will defeat it again, as we always do. But it's that moment of like, we go again, you know, like we could have prevented this, right? It's like we could have prevented it with.
It was an open note test right before the election.
Yeah. I agree. I think eventually we'll beat it back. But that is one thing that I feel like has also been really disheartening about the way things are unfolding is it's not just that like we're dealing with a fascist and he's destroying the country, but there's so much apathy. There's so many people that feel it's hopeless or they're not paying attention and they feel checked out. And it just kind of hit me yesterday, like what I think we can do about it, that I want to like people like, you know, Boardwalk and Luke who can talk to people, like the idea that I want people to really like get on board with and do is everyone is an influencer. We think about like, oh, you got hundreds of thousands of followers, you're an influencer. I have like 20 followers, I'm not an influencer. But you can have influence over people just because they're in your life. You know, that your people at your church, people that you work with, any of those people. And I think the big problem right now is there's so many people that are checked out and not paying attention. And I think that what we need to do right now is not allow that. I think like those of us that are paying attention need to make everyone else pay attention. And our influence should be used to get all of our audience to help us do that. So like put this stuff in people's faces. I feel like there's only two ways we're going to get people to agree with us and like care to fight. It's either going to be like you can appeal to their sense of decency or you can appeal to their selfishness. But I feel like there's ways to do both of those things right now. And you have to kind of figure out, can your audience be appealed to for decency?
It depends who you're dealing with.
And if not, appeal to their selfishness. Yeah. I don't even care why they get on board. I need them to get on board. And so I feel like that's the call to action right now is like, we all have to be influencers right now. In like, not in the internet sense, but just in the, like, we have to make people look. Like these things that are happening.
I think people underestimate like the power of what their voice can do without a phone involved.
100%.
Like
even just sharing and liking and boosting like a story about some atrocious thing happening, something that's going to actually like affect somebody with a moral compass that's checked out. If you can get those people to like hear a story about like a legal resident getting beat up by ICE, that's like morally wrong. And if you have a moral compass, that should bother you a lot. And if you don't have a moral compass, you should be worried about yourself getting into that situation, because if they're not believing people who are like citizens and residents, then it can happen to any of us.
I had that conversation with somebody like 2 days ago. I was like, I was talking about the news with my roommate who also goes to the gym with me, and we were sitting in the sauna and this guy came in, we were talking about it, and he kind of butted in and he was like, yeah, but you know, like that was ICE, like it was a mistake. And I was like, yeah, but how would you feel if it was you or your wife or your kid? Like, I bet it would be a significantly different story if that was the case. And he was like, yeah, I guess I never really thought about it that way. I was like, yeah, that's the way you need to think about these things. They're not one-off events.
Yeah.
The other thing with that is, like, so I live in LA, and I'm, you know, not too far away from Cypress Park and Boyle Heights and these other locations. Like, even yesterday, you know, there was a mother, and I think they were in a car of three, but definitely with their child. ICE came up, blocked her, and they hit her in the back axle, the tire. And then they realized, oh, we've got the wrong person. And then it was a hit and run, right? But what ended up happening was, like, to Meredith's point of, like, influence, like, we're all micro-influencers, right? Like, our one-to-one kind of contact and conversations can have a big impact, because somebody can be like, oh, I know this person, so like their words mean more to me than if I was blasting out to 1 million followers. Maybe I get some people. But in this situation, like yesterday, you've got people on the corner that are screaming, yelling, recording. That gets picked up. Then now I'm seeing more news stories that are actually happening here in LA. And to that, I would say, like, you can influence one-off people that you share these like citizen videos that are through the app or whatever, but then like you get enough people talking and clamoring about something, then like more networks or more people begin to talk about it and be like, well, this is really up. Like, they got the wrong person, and then it was a hit and run, and then they sped away. Like, what are we doing here, right? It's because, oh, we thought it was this person, and they had darker skin, and they looked like they were Latino or Latino. Like, this idea of profiling people because of what they look like or their skin color, it does wake some people up to be like, wow, that's in my neighborhood, or like that's, you know, someone shared it or whatever it is. And I think those can have real big impacts and begin to wake people up to be like, whoa, this is a really situation that we're in right now. It's not just like getting the illegal criminals out or whatever. It's now like, oh, these are everyday people who are getting terrorized. Like, this is PTSD type shit that's going to impact everyone when they see a white, gray, black truck, van, whatever, to be like, I'm not going to leave my house anymore. Like, it's traumatizing.
The one I talked about the other day was the woman who was zip tied and had $1,000 taken off her by an ICE impersonator, because I was talking to somebody about how they can walk, they walk around with no badges and a mask, a full face mask on, and he was like, yeah, but like they got to keep their identities secret so that they don't get followed home. And I was like, okay, sure, maybe, but not really. And how does that play when people start having impersonators come? Like, where's the stop? Like, do you just resist arrest every time? Because then you're going to tell us about how people are resisting arrest and they deserve more violent, like, interrogations. And like, there's somewhere that has to stop. And he was like, yeah, I don't have an answer. I said, so maybe stop supporting the masks and no badges. It's terrible. It's like, stop.
Yeah, it's hugely dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, the impersonators. You know, I don't know if that was the same story, but there was another story of a woman who, you know, it was like an attempted where the guy came in, you know, and it's like these people are just buying. Somebody is selling this stuff on Amazon. People are buying it, and they're going around trying to profiteer off of these moments and traumatize people for their own benefit. To be like, I want their money, I want to take control of you, I want leverage in some way. And to the point that you made is like, yeah, I've seen so many videos of someone being like, can you show your face? Why are you wearing the gator mask? Like, can you show your badge? And they don't acknowledge, or they walk away as soon as the camera starts filming. And you're like, I don't know if that was real, like if that was a legitimate federal officer, or if it was just an impersonator who's cosplaying, you know?
I saw one yesterday that the guy asked for the badge number and the guy pulled the gun and shot him with a non-lethal bullet. And I was like, okay, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a huge public safety concern, and that's why I feel like if you can't appeal to someone's sense of decency, you can appeal to their sense of selfishness. Like, this could happen to literally any of us.
Yeah, what would you do if you were in that spot?
Yeah, like I literally do worry about it. I live in a neighborhood that is probably like 99% immigrants. Like, it's a nice neighborhood, love it here. But all my neighbors are immigrants, and I, for the longest time, was in the habit of like going for walks, going for runs around my neighborhood by myself anytime I want. It's a safe neighborhood. I just recently bought more gym equipment for my house so that I don't have to go around the neighborhood by myself, because I don't know who might come into our neighborhood and start taking people. And I feel like it's maybe less safe now to go for a run in my own neighborhood, which is otherwise a very safe, very nice neighborhood. And I'm more worried about the government than like immigrants or neighbors. That's not who I'm worried about, or somebody pretending to be the government. So yeah, it's a huge danger, and I feel like that's the drum that we need to beat to get everybody on board.
It's a fear I never thought I would have.
Yeah, I mean, no one who's an American citizen, or even if you're not an American citizen but you're here on visa or whatever it might be, like the parallels are like screaming at you in the face of like, we're back to the 40s, baby. Like, this is where people are hiding in their houses and being like, okay, hide in the basement, don't say anything. Like, that's where we are. And that's,
there's that line
crazy.
from Anne Frank's diary that's about they're taking people at all hours of the night. People are afraid. Like, that is right there. Yeah. And people just ignore it.
Well, if you're a Republican, you have to understand the other side, right? Like, that's what Florida says. They're like, oh, well, yeah, sure, the Holocaust happened, but like, did it happen? And you're like,
or if it did happen, did it really happen that bad? I get enraged. There's
some people that aren't going to be reachable also. Like, we can't worry about the people that we can't reach. But I don't think that's actually most people. I would say it's like maybe 10, 15% of the population that is just so unreasonable and so unhinged that like we're not going to reach them. But I would hope 80% plus of the US population, if they are actually like truly aware of what's going on and like forced to look at it and forced to understand that it's immoral and it's dangerous, that most of them are going to want to make it stop, because one of those two things is going to get to them.
So Trump had, 49% of the vote? I think 33% of that is like full-blooded MAGA. Like, they're diehard. And I think 16% really just didn't know what the was going on. And of the real MAGAs, I think another 10% can be cut off if you just show them actual fact.
Yeah, so
that's what I have to believe. Otherwise, I have no hope. Like, the idea that 49% of the country is just really this bad doesn't give me much hope.
No, that is scary.
I think a lot of them also, live in that cycle, that vacuum of like, I get my news from Fox, and then the people I talk to only hear this. But
I listen to Charlie Kirk, and I listen to
exactly. Like, you only hear the same talking points. Even when it came to a bunch of the regurgitated talking points of the GOP, I saw, who is it? Matt Walsh and like several others, where it was like the same, we need to deport and like not allow immigration to happen.
I saw that one. They had the same first sentence.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous.
Right.
The Heritage Foundation check must have just cleared.
Oh, absolutely. But I look at that and I think back to like, to the micro-influencer point is everyone knows someone in their life, right? They clean your house, they walk your dog, you see them at the restaurant, or they go to the hotel, or whatever it is. Like, there is someone within 1 or 2 degrees of separation from you that you interact with that is going to be impacted.
Yep.
And I think, like, while a one-to-one kind of deprogramming takes a lot of effort and I've got an uncle who's MAGA, and, like, I had a conversation with him yesterday via text, and it was, like, it started with him texting me and some random guy that is his friend out in here, LA, and it started with, like, burn, LA, burn, and I'm like...
Holy shit. That's a wild way to start one.
Yeah, and it's just like it goes to show you that these people are, you know, either not in the situation, out of context, but, you know, regurgitating the same type of stuff. But if you can at least attempt to make it relatable on a one-to-one anecdotal level, to be like, that person that's at your job is not going to be there on Monday because they either got deported or they're afraid, right?
Right.
And I do think there is some power in that, like at least on the micro level of being like, this, you know, John Doe, whoever in your life is going to be impacted in this way. And I feel like, to Meredith's point, whether it's like actually out of sincerity or selfishness, I think there is some power to it, to be like, this person may or may not be in your life anymore because of the things that you decided to do when you went to go vote, and now there are repercussions and consequences. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah. My first question is, do you plan to run for office at some point in the future? Is that something you're interested in?
I don't know that I would go full, you know, state representative or Congress, but like school board, city board, that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you make serious like effect at that local level way faster. Mm-hmm. Like I see, like, I mean, most of what deals with book banning is school boards, and that I can't stand. No book should be banned.
I agree. I feel very strongly about books. Huge book fan.
I feel really strongly about books.
And then within the Democratic Party right now, are there people in the party that you feel like you see some hope with this, you know, person, that maybe they could be the future of the party? Like, who are you watching? Who are you maybe getting enthusiastic about?
Coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, really, it has to do with age. It's just, like, the younger, almost one-to-one, the younger a candidate is, the more excited I am about them. AOC, Andy Bashar, Pete Buttigieg, let me think here, Gretchen Whitmer. There's a load of them, really, and somehow they're not octogenarians. And they have, like, a genuine plan about how they want to move the country forward instead of maintaining status quo. That's who I'm excited about. I'm curious what you guys are excited about, though.
I agree about Pete Buttigieg and AOC. They're, I know, a little different politically in terms of, like, he's a little more moderate, she's a little more liberal. I'm probably in between the two of them myself, but I think Pete Buttigieg is such an excellent communicator, and he's so good at talking to people that aren't already on our side, that having him as, like, the person that gets people to come back to the Democrats, I think could be really effective, just because he's, like, so practiced at it and he's so good at it. I love watching him talk to people, and the way he can just kind of, like, reason with people that don't.
I've watched, like, every one of his town halls, I think, and they were all excellent. I've yet to see him fumble or flub. He's dialed in.
So I'm excited to see him.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to kind of bounce off that point. Is I think Pete is obviously a strong communicator, and you see that whenever he would go on Fox News at the end of the Biden administration, like, he was just, like, hitting them back, you know, whether it was the town halls or he was having one-on-one interviews with, you know, on Fox or Fox Business or whatever. He knows how to hold his own. He knows how to, like, speak calmly, not get too emotional in the conversation. He has the facts, the data, all of the information to present, to be like, well, actually, if we look at this, and also doesn't do, like, the well actually in, like, an annoying way, you know?
Yeah, he does it in like a almost charming way, I think.
Right. And then, I mean, and then there's Whitmer. Like, Whitmer's on the Breakfast Club. Like, she's doing all these things that are, like, relatable, that are communicating to not just the general group of people that you'd be like, oh, we're politicking here. She's, like, on the radio, talking to people, connecting with different communities. And I think AOC obviously is someone who's been, like, a huge person within the party since she started, right? It went from bartender to representative, and now the question is, like, what's next, right? Like, did she go for Senate? I don't know. But I think a lot of these people, like, the youth really communicates the energy and the relatability, because you've got people who are like, as much, you know, some people want to be like, as much as I love Bernie,
he's old.
He's pretty old.
Right. And, like, as much as I love these other people, while they do have experience and they have the knowledge to say, you know, where we are and where we can go, I think a lot of people are like, wow, man, you're like my grandpa's age, right? Like, and I barely talk to them, like, whatever it might be. But
it's hard to connect.
It's really hard to connect. Yeah. And so, like, you know, even to the point that I was making earlier of Gen Z, like, post 2000, you know, having that relative kind of milestone like marker in mind of like where these things were in history. I think the same thing is true for representatives. Like the younger they are, the more relatable they are, and like less cringy or whatever it might be. But I look at them and I say, these are people who can go on the podcast. I mean, again, Pete, he's going on, not all of, but most like right-wing podcasts and holding his own and being like, that's not true, that's fake, that's false, whatever it is. And like,
I bet that must get exhausting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, when you're like, I also live in a minority here, which is I'm a gay man with a husband, and I'm under attack just for existing for who I want to be, right? And then on top of that, I also have to fight this other fight, which is just like to progress forward as a society and as a democracy to just better everyone else's situation outside of my own, right?
Right.
But yeah, so I think that's a good point of like, the younger they are, the more like excited. And I think that's probably like an energy, relatability, Well,
because like I see people that make the comparison. They're like, well, Donald Trump is old and he won. And it's my opinion that Donald Trump did not win with the young people. Because like there was that polling that came out like 10 years ago about how the GOP had no legs to stand on with old people. And I feel like the Democratic Party laughed, and then the GOP said, all right, hold my beer. And they wrote a shitload of checks to young-ish white men, gave them podcast mics, and said, go stir some shit up. That's who I think won Gen Z with Trump. People like Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk. I think that's who won them. And like it's because they're young-ish. They communicate in a way that's like it's punchy and it's like it's very like blood sporty. Like they do it in a way that makes you're like, oh yeah, that's them. And that's who I think won them the election. At least with Gen Z.
I think the other reason that they have had a lot of success communicating with these young men, I'm not a young man, obviously, so I can't speak to the psychology of young men, but the pitch that I think is so seductive is a lot of times they make it feel like your problems are someone else's fault, which is like classic fascism, but a lot of these young guys that like, maybe they're not going where they want to go with their lives right now, that feels really good to hear that like, oh, your life's not the way you want it to be. That's their fault.
COVID definitely like exacerbated that problem of like people who were maybe in this in-between stage of school, real like adult life, not knowing how to go forward. They lost out on that like personal connection, which I think can influence obviously your, societal beliefs, your political beliefs, things like that, where you miss out on those things. And when you're isolated, I think just really is throwing kerosene on the problem of like, you're a lonely white male who clearly didn't get what you were deserved. And that is the reason of George Floyd, or that is
it's
the reason
really easy to
of
tumble
Kamala
down
Harris.
that right-wing YouTube rabbit hole when you're sitting in your apartment alone. You haven't seen anybody in 2 weeks. And you're like, oh, this guy tells me it's not my fault.
And YouTube as a platform is so culpable and such a problem, even in a way that the other platforms are. And I don't know how aware, Gabe's heard me ranting about this because it affects our content on YouTube. I don't know how aware you are, Luke, of this problem, but like, and I wrote a whole rant about it online and sent it to you offline if you're interested in it. But there's a huge problem with YouTube with very deliberately catering to and pushing young, white, male, right-wing content to the detriment of the platform, its users, its content creators, like no other platform does. Like Meta doesn't do it like to this extent that I've ever seen, nor does TikTok, nor does anyone. This is exclusively a YouTube problem. And it's bad because it's like it has so much influence and it uses its influence to deliberately do bad things, like to deliberately push right-wing content, to deliberately like push people into this content. Every time I pull up, we have 2 channels. And every time I pull up my channels, it tells me that all of these right-wing manosphere channels are like my channel. And I'm like, this is a you problem, YouTube.
I take that as an insult.
YouTube's algorithm is not good, and it's like intentionally not good. Like Meta would never make that mistake. TikTok would never make that mistake. And I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's a feature. So YouTube, like I could do a whole other thing just on YouTube, but YouTube is such a problem, and I feel like it's a problem that no one is aware of. Because women I know, when I ask them, what do you watch on YouTube? Even if they're like not very online people, they'll just say, I don't really use YouTube. I feel like it's not for me, but they don't like really think about why they feel that way. All the like progressives I know, they're not big into YouTube as consumers. And then all the liberal content creators I know, either women or guys that make content that appeals to women, they have a very hard time getting views, even though they have no problem.
I don't get views on YouTube at all.
But you get tons of views, and it's the same with us. We don't really do great on YouTube, but we get so many views on all of our other platforms, and so it's like, okay, it's not an us problem, it's a YouTube problem, and it's on purpose.
It's a YouTube problem.
Which I guess does beg the question of like, do you find some way to like, if clearly, you know, YouTube's not changing the algorithm and it's biased towards men, or at least that type of content, then trying to break through and then have men, you know, kind of address those things, which is like, you know, the political progressive kind of talking points, you know, pro rights or this or that, whatever it might be, and wondering like, well, if I'm already having to digest this content that's by men, about men, for men, whatever, like,
right.
Is there a way to break through and have men talk about it in these pro men channels, and then educate people to be like, oh wow, I didn't even know that, or like, you know, like I feel like it probably takes a lot of work, I would imagine, just to get into those circles to have your voice heard. I mean, like. Yeah. You know, you've got like Pete on the Flagrant Ones, right? And you've got other people going in, but it's like one-off things. But when they do go on those things, it goes viral.
It. Yep.
Right. It's again, with the like deprogramming one of like one-on-one type of situation, it takes so much effort and so much work that you're like, I'm exhausted by one.
And you kind of like have to wonder, like, does that deprogrammed person carry out, like, do they do it again? And I most of the time I think not. I think they're so afraid of like going to the, you know, like telling someone else in their circle, yeah, I don't think that way anymore. I think it almost never happens, which kind of like further exacerbates the problem, because it's even tougher. Then you got to do it with every single person every time, and the people you've worked on don't help.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You're definitely in the lion's den, and you know, as soon as you're like, oh great, I like helped you out or whatever, they're like, you know,
you talked to me?
Fear,
I don't know what you're talking about.
For fear of retribution from their own, who they were just with, right, or whatever it might be. And I get it, right? Like that group can be visceral and hateful and destructive. I mean, much like, you know, as we talked about, like the super far left people, right? It's the extremes can be dangerous, but I think to your point is like, as soon as you get someone like, you know, 9 times out of 10, you probably won't get them to come back and be like, yeah, they, you know, it's like
they walk out of the lion's den. They don't help you deal with the other ones.
Yeah. And then they close the gate and like, all right, good luck. You know?
Yeah, good luck. I hope
think
you do all right.
Being the kind of person that's like, for lack of a better word, a missionary, like Pete is, where you go and talk to people that really don't agree with you and try and help them understand why like they should reconsider their positions, is like such a special, rare superpower. I don't have it, but I admire it so much. And like, we need these people that are willing to do it. I hate the way sometimes people on the left will criticize people that do it, like, you know, criticize Pete for going on the Flagrant podcast, and I'm like, no, he has to. Like, somebody has to. I'm not going to talk to them. Yeah.
And I think there's a difference between the way that someone like Pete does it, where like he goes and he's very firm with the way that he communicates with them. Like he doesn't give credence to the idea that some of the things that they deal with are good. Like when they talk about banning books with Pete, he's like, yeah, that's terrible, full stop. Like doesn't give that any leeway. And I think there are people on the left that don't do that they go and they treat those ideas like there's something that, okay, it's bad, but we can talk about it, like there's a middle ground to reach. Yeah. Not really.
Right.
So we've been ranting for a bit about like how shitty everything is. What do you do to protect your sanity? I want to know for us, but also for anyone listening. Like what kind of self-care type thing, for lack of a better word, things do you do?
I go to the gym every day. Like it's a happy place, but also like I go to the comic book store and the bookstore once a week at least, and I hang out with my girlfriend and my family like excessively. Like outside of dealing with like my like posting and like staying up to date on the news and stuff, I try and stay off social media as much as possible, because for the most part it kind of sucks ass. Like you have to really cultivate an algorithm to not ever have to see the bad part of what's going on today, and it just like I've never been successful at it. So like any social media I do touch, I'm like, yeah, I want to see things about comic books, I want to see things about movies and books, and that's it. I don't want to see about how awful things are, unless I'm going looking for it. which I do unfortunately
I have
spend
a
a lot of
separate
time
like
doing.
Instagram account that's a personal account. I don't post to it. I just scroll it, but it's nothing but
Yep.
like food and cats and like art and things that I want to look at.
Yep, I completely get that.
So our favorite thing to do when we do our weekly podcast, because we just talk about stuff that pisses us off, is we always wrap up with our Delp deck, and we have one that is only questions that make you happy. So if you are willing to play along,
Sure.
you can choose deep, light, in between.
Bit
Okay.
a deep one.
What seemingly small decision had a positive impact on your life?
I started doing Boy Scouts when I was in like middle school, and like it has completely changed. Like, but prior to that, I was a big like video game guy. Like, I still like to play video games, but like didn't really mess with the outdoors too much. And I started doing Boy Scouts, and since then I have been to like a majority of the national parks that are in the U.S. Just out of sheer love for the outdoors that Boy Scouts taught me. Like, I have nothing makes me happier than to be out in those spaces where there's no cell service out there. They can't get me here. Like, it is wonderful. And like, I owe it all to the fact that I went to a Boy Scout meeting when I was like 10
That's
years
great.
old.
Do you have one, Gabe?
I was always someone who was like, oh, you know, I'll goof off in class and I'll like make a little, if I can film a video for a class project, I'll do it. But it wasn't until like maybe about 10 or 11 years ago when I finally was like, someone said like, oh, you should do an improv class, right? And I was like, okay, fine. And going after like that, I was like hooked, and I was like, oh, I got to be on stage and I want to perform and I want to do sketch and all this stuff. And like that ultimately ended up having an impact. Like, it wasn't until 2020 when I was, you know, dealing with the show of everything, right? Like, we all had
Right.
COVID and George Floyd and the election, all of these things came to head. And I think for me, that comedy kind of like shined through to be like, how can I personally digest these insane things that are happening and at the same time make them relatable for people to see online? And that was just like how I kept myself sane. And I think comedy was like that bridge to be like cathartic, but also kind of like helpful for people.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I think the thing that came to mind for me was that my friends and I happened to decide to go to this DJ night ages ago because it was where I met my husband. We met in the real world at a bar. And if we had decided to do something else that night, we might not have met. So it was like, at the time, like, we didn't think much of like, oh, we're just going to go see this DJ and like go listen to music that we like. And I didn't know it was going to be like the day that I'm going to meet the person I'm going to be with forever. Yeah.
That's awesome.
All right. Well, tell everyone where they can find you so they can go check out your content.
Yeah, ItsLuke pretty much everywhere. There's like sometimes there's a 7 at the end, but like most places ItsLuke gets me there. That's where I am. I'm on TikTok and Instagram primarily are my two
Thank
big
you
ones.
so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.